Hello and welcome to the Bot Box. Names are funny things. Some names can be explained, some cannot. And I really cannot explain the thought process behind naming a robot Suicidal Tendencies. I'm sure there is a reason for it, but that reason is unknown to me. So basically what I'm saying here is, don't stay here for an explanation of ST's name. Do stay here for tag team fun, cheese puns, and shunts nearly ending up on the menu. Oh, also an annihilator. You have been warned. Suicidal Tendencies started off as a yellow-red box wedge robot armed with a spiked drum spinner in the form of milling cutters. It was also a track robot, which makes it unusual and different, and it made its debut in Series 3 of Robot Wars, landing in Heat A, where it drew Forklift's Revenge, which was armed with chains that went round and lifted robots up, and no actual forklift. Suicidal Tendencies got an attacking on Forklift's Revenge early on, but failed to do that much in the way of damage. The second attack took Suicidal Tendencies up Forklift's Revenge's very big wedge. So Suicidal Tendencies backed off wisely before going in on attack on the sides. This sent Forklift's Revenge to the flame pit, but Forklift's Revenge did not like the idea of getting roasted. So Suicidal Tendencies sent Forklift's Revenge to Sir Killalot, who lifted Forklift's Revenge in the air by one of those chains and pitted them. No, now is not the time to comment on the lack of a forklift or the robot called Forklift's Revenge. Now is the time to talk about Suicidal Tendencies' next fight against chainsaw-wielding lifter Razor Blade. Suicidal Tendencies managed to get to Razor Blade first, but Razor Blade managed to tap Suicidal Tendencies 3 times. Suicidal Tendencies drove over the front end of Razor Blade before the two robots had a hard time finding an angle of attack. Razor Blade nearly used its shape to tip Suicidal Tendencies over, and Suicidal Tendencies attacked Razor Blade's side, ultimately pushing Razor Blade across the arena before Razor Blade escaped and the track went down on Suicidal Tendencies. So Razor Blade elected to try and guide Suicidal Tendencies into the pit, but drove itself onto the edge of oblivion. So Sir Killalot freed Razor Blade. How nice of it. And Razor Blade annoyed Suicidal Tendencies until time ran out, and the judges were called in. They ruled in favour of Suicidal Tendencies because Razor Blade had been in the pit. So that was Suicidal Tendencies through to the Heat Final, where it faced Mace 2, another lifter. Mace 2 managed to flip Suicidal Tendencies over early on. Being invertible, one of the positive things of having tracks as Suicidal Tendencies does, well, okay, unless you're Mortis. Suicidal Tendencies was fine, but Mace 2 would not leave Suicidal Tendencies alone, electing to guide them to Sergeant Bash's corner. Suicidal Tendencies escaped right into the clutches of Mace 2, and even ended up atop Mace 2 before being righted and sent to Shunt. Suicidal Tendencies did not want to hang out with Shunt, not with that big axe, so it got out of the corner pretty sharpish. Mace 2 elected to annoy Suicidal Tendencies again, flipping it over. Whilst trying to escape Mace 2, Suicidal Tendencies ended it was the chaos and couldn't escape quite so easily. So Kay had managed to grab hold of one of Suicidal Tendencies' tracks. But Suicidal Tendencies did get out once the Kill-a-Lot let go. Mace 2 then chose to send Suicidal Tendencies to Kill-a-Lot again, and when that failed, Matilda, then Kill-a-Lot again, then Shunt. Suicidal Tendencies ended up on the wrong end of Shunt's axe. Time ran out soon afterwards, and the judges were called in, and they ruled in favour of Mace 2. Suicidal Tendencies returned for Series 4 and landed in Heat H. It was now see-through and armed with lifting forks and a tiny axe, affectionately referred to as a toothpick. They were also seeded 32nd, the lowest seed available in the tournament. They drew Axebot Killatron and Lifter Maverick. Suicidal Tendencies went for Killatron first, attacking from the sides in order to avoid Killatron's big axe, and landed in Axe Blow of its own, though of course lacking Killatron levels of force. The 32nd seed backed off whilst Rick tried to have a go at Killatron, but showed up to annoy the Axebot some more, even in the face of a flick from Maverick. That rhymes. The three robots separated before Suicidal Tendencies attacked and put a few little holes in Killatron. With the axe, of course. Then the 32nd seed turned its attention to Maverick, lifting it up and carrying it to Matilda, axing all the way. That just left Suicidal Tendencies vulnerable to Killatron, who axed the 32nd seeds. Not long afterwards, Killatron was the one under attack. As was Maverick, it was getting axed. Suicidal Tendencies backed off to focus on Maverick, which it flipped over. Maverick could not self-rate, so it was out. So Suicidal Tendencies chose to annoy Killatron until cease was called. Next up was Cutting Spinny Thing wielding Axelbot Wheelosaurus, complete with Victorian prime rails, and a serious case of the Paulies. Suicidal Tendencies were still worried about Wheelosaurus though, because that cutting spinny thing could take off one of their tracks quite possibly, and those tracks were a bit on the exposed side. However, this was not a problem. Suicidal Tendencies pushed Wheelosaurus around early on because Wheelosaurus's case of the Paulies was so serious that Wheelosaurus was not actually moving. Suicidal Tendencies landed an axe blow that caused a petrol leak. And Suicidal Tendencies sent Wheelosaurus over to the flame pit, which was the cue, of course, for fire. So, Suicidal Tendencies was through to another heat final where it faced Flipper on Wheels, Wheelie with Cheese, the 15th seeds. So you know what that means? There will be here. That's right, cheese buns. Suicidal Tendencies decided it would be a good idea to go for Wheelie Big Cheese's wheels, knowing that this would be a cheddar idea than going anywhere near this 15th seed's Flipper. So it managed to eventually actually get to the front of Wheelie Big Cheese, brave thing to do, and got underneath the Flipper with its little lifting forks and carried Wheelie Big Cheese around and into Dead Metal, who wanted a slice of cheese. And got a slice of cheese. Bit metallic though. Not quite Blue Stilton. A pushing war ensued, and it was close to which robot had the greater strength. But in the process, Suicidal Tendencies lost the left-hand side of its drive. The pit opened. Suicidal Tendencies stayed dangerously close to the pit. Wheelie Big Cheese decided to try and carefully tease the 32nd seeds into the pit, only to nearly end up in oblivion itself. After a second attempt at pitting Suicidal Tendencies, the 15th seeds went down. Yeah, I think there's a rule about pitting Suicidal Tendencies, and that is don't try, you'll pit yourself instead. Between Razor Blade and Really Big Cheese, it just looks like a bad idea. Anyway, Suicidal Tendencies celebrated. Even Jonathan Pierce thought they'd won. But the judges wanted another look. They ruled that as Suicidal Tendencies lost one side of its drive and were lacking in control, they were ruled effectively immobile. Pretty much similar to the Clusterbot ruling earlier on in the series with Gemini, when 50% of the robot went out, one Clusterbot got impaled on a spike, and it was deemed that all the robot was out because half the robot was out. In this case, because half Suicidal Tendencies was out, the left-hand side of the drive, all of Suicidal Tendencies was out. So they ruled in favour of Really Big Cheese. Luckily, Really Big Cheese's next opponent has your back, Team Thermonuclear Warfare, and will fight to avenge the honour of your robot's suicidal tendencies. Spoiler alert, though this is a pretty old spoiler, Tornado did avenge Suicidal Tendencies' honour. Someone needs to make a Robot Arena 2 fight of Suicidal Tendencies versus Tornado. They just do. Anyway, now it's time for some Annihilator-based fun. The Northern Annihilator, where Suicidal Tendencies faced Flipper Chaos 2, Thwackbot Stinger, Spikebot Spikosaurus, and Axebots Dominator 2 and Kilohertz. Suicidal Tendencies went after Dominator 2 early on and managed to tip the Axebot over, but in the process tipped itself early. Having Chaos 2 in the way did not help matters. Suicidal Tendencies needs no self-writers though, so it could go on its merry way and wreak havoc. So it chose to annoy Spikosaurus and push it into a corner. At this point, Chaos 2 slammed Suicidal Tendencies before going away to target Stinger before booking Spikosaurus. Suicidal Tendencies, that is, not Chaos 2. Suicidal Tendencies got flicked by Chaos 2 as well, which never helps. Never helps having Chaos 2 in the arena with you. Unless you're one of the lucky robots that have managed to beat, well, the good robots that have managed to beat Chaos 2. Not lucky. Chaos 2 ended up stuck on the arena wall and got axed by Dominator 2. And Suicidal Tendencies elected to stay well clear. Smart move. Chaos 2 flipped Kilohertz while Suicidal Tendencies tried to annoy the flipper, only to get caught by Spikosaurus. Chaos 2 got axed a lot thereafter. Suicidal Tendencies had a book, but it was still attached to Spikosaurus. Chaos 2 was the first out. In the next fight, Suicidal Tendencies got away from Dominator 2 in time, only to get hit by Spikosaurus' rear end. Suicidal Tendencies tried to annoy Kilohertz before getting hit by Spikosaurus and choosing to stay out of trouble. Sensible. Oh well, until it joined the Let's All Annoy Kilohertz party, choosing to help Kilohertz out. Oh well, they are both see-through. Suicidal Tendencies ended up out of focus again until it decided to attack Sergeant Bash, again helping Kilohertz out. However, after all that, it was Stinger that was the one that went out due to losing one side. It got a spike and took out an aerial on that side of the robot. In the next fight, Suicidal Tendencies was the last bot to enter the fray, choosing to annoy Kilohertz before Spikosaurus spiked them again, before giving them a good spin and making Suicidal Tendencies nice and dizzy and slamming them into 2 walls before Suicidal Tendencies got out. Suicidal Tendencies then chose to annoy Dominator 2, only to nearly get axed for its trouble. So Suicidal Tendencies went after Kilohertz instead until it went out of focus, quietly went fut and died. So it went out. So, on to Extreme 1, where Suicidal Tendencies had another weaponry change to gain a scoop and a razor-esque crushing beak. Pretty hefty crushing beak as well. It entered the Tag Team Terror, and yes, I have the rules ready, still held together by sticky tape. And anyway, Suicidal Tendencies partnered itself with an Axebot, the Steel Avenger. Better to be fighting with one than against one. First, they fought Pokey Mandibly Bot Napalm, which I'm going to have to describe a lot better someday, and Round Lifter's Chromalot. The Steel Avenger axed Napalm a lot early on, and also managed to hit the floor once the bundle, before shoving Napalm around. Napalm, barely alive, tagged Suicidal Tendencies, which was not its partner. Napalm paid the price by gaining a hole and almost losing a whole side panel. So Suicidal Tendencies tagged the Steel Avenger and didn't axe them because they didn't have an axe anymore. And the Steel Avenger axed Napalm some more. Soon after, Suicidal picked Napalm up and dropped them out of the arena. Napalm was pretty much no longer functional at that point. So Chromalot and faced Steel Avenger and Suicidal Tendencies at the same time. Evidently, the rules left the ring with Napalm. Who needs the rules anyway? I might as well cryogenically freeze them in the freezer over there. I can't see where they went. Suicidal Tendencies very nearly attacked its teammate due to Chromalot's slipperiness, but the pit was opened soon afterwards and in went Chromalot. Next up was Flipper Thermidor 2 and Grabber Stroke Rammer Cerberus. Suicidal Tendencies went out and pushed Cerberus a bit, but failed to get hold of Cerberus. So Cerberus tagged Thermidor 2. Suicidal Tendencies corralled the lobster bot into a corner where the Steel Avenger was. Soon afterwards, it was an all-out brawl. No, I can't retrieve the rules just to defenestrate them again. I can't. I just can't. And I haven't even defenestrated the rules. The Steel Avenger axed Thermidor 2 and left it to cook on the flame pit, as I think one is supposed to do with lobster Thermidor. I don't know how to make lobster Thermidor. I'm vegetarian. Cerberus therefore was left alone. Not that it stopped them from attacking their teammate. The Steel Avenger opened the pit and tried to put Cerberus in. Tried and failed. Suicidal Tendencies stayed out of the way and annoyed a thrown to Thermidor 2, which had managed to hit the Steel Avenger in flight twice, 2 separate fights. And Cerberus somehow managed to hang on until time ran out. And the judges recording. The judges ruled in favour of Suicidal Tendencies and the Steel Avenger. So that put them through to the final of Tag Team Terror. where they faced furry-lifted Deitor, which had lost a lot of fur due to fire, and pyramid-shaped cutting disc wielder Pussycat, which had a lot of gaffer tape on. Suicidal Tendencies grabbed hold of Pussycat early on, though Pussycat was winning the pushing war, forcing Suicidal Tendencies to let go and chase them around the arena. Then Deitor and the Steel Avenger basically ran out of patience and fought. Deitor flipped the Steel Avenger over several times. Meanwhile, Suicidal Tendencies grabbed Pussycat again before letting go. Cue another chase. Pussycat trashed the pit release trier, which is one way of opening the pit, I guess, before Suicidal Tendencies grabbed them, after Suicidal Tendencies had rescued the Steel Avenger. Suicidal Tendencies was chasing Pussycat as time ran out and the judges called in. They ruled in favour of Deitor and Pussycat. Suicidal Tendencies, of course, were in Series 5 and they were seeded again. They were seeded 21st and landed in Heat K, where it drew Flipper Rick, the successor of Maverick. Rick also had a little spinny thing on the back. Suicidal Tendencies grabbed Rick early on, grabbing Rick from behind, showing no fear of the spinny thing, and put holes in Rick, not allowing Rick a chance to attack. Rick gained a few holds so it was carried around the arena. Rick, however, did not die. It carried on, it kept on functioning, and lasted until time ran out and the judges called in. However, it's worth noting here, Jonathan Pierce, the commentator, said he would eat shunt if Rick was given the win. The win was given by judge's decision to Suicidal Tendencies, so shunt was not on the menu. Now, I would be talking about another fight next, against Spherical Axebot Destructible. But, unfortunately, after that first fight, Suicidal Tendencies basically died. And as a direct result, they had to withdraw. They were planning on entering Series 6, ultimately they did not. And there was no return for Suicidal Tendencies, which is a real shame. Suicidal Tendencies probably would not have gone past the heat final even if it had beaten Destructible, because it would have faced Razor, and there's a lot more on Suicidal Tendencies for Razor to hit than there is on Razor for Suicidal Tendencies to hit. It was a good robot with some absolutely horrendous look at times and technical gremlins. I'd say between it and Behemoth, you've got one of the unluckiest robots in the history of Robot Wars. Possibly the fact that it didn't have as many fights as Behemoth might ultimately cause it to be not quite the unluckiest, but definitely it's up there as one of the unluckiest. Technical gremlins did not help its cause, but without those issues, it could have been what it so very nearly was, and what some may say should have been in Series 4, a Series semi-finalist. Maybe not a champion, but definitely could have got out of a heat. However, I don't think I'll ever be able to explain the name. Anyone know? The comments down there. The real question is, though, can I explain next week's subject's name, though? That is a very good question. This we need next week's subject. its grunt. Until next week, Allison244, out.